And Chris as well have done as much reading as we could. Having an 8-month-old around this time was an interesting challenge. But you might be surprised what we've been reading this time. We've been reading some atheist books because we are not afraid. And some books about atheist books. One of the main reasons is because I don't like the idea of Christianity being a subculture caught in an enclave that won't face the issues. And I have to say, having read all that I've read about particularly the new atheist standpoint, which I won't elaborate on that today, I am more confident about my Christianity than I have ever been. I've not read a single reason or a single argument or a single presentation in all of those things that has made me feel anything more but extra confident about my faith in Jesus and about the truth of the gospel. One of those books that we read was by a former evangelical preacher in America who has become quite a prominent voice for new atheism in America. And I have to say where he uses the Bible and tries to use the Bible in just a horrendous way. I talked to Chris a lot about it. Just, talk about Christians misquoting. I mean, the misquotes that he used for his argument are just horrendous. That's another story. But I have to say, I found, and Chris also, a great deal of compassion in my heart because I didn't particularly recognize the God and the Jesus and the gospel that he was atheisting against. But I realize that it's there and that many people's encounter with God, with Christ, with the claims of the Bible have come from that stream. And it hurt me and disappointed me and made me want to apologize again, which many of you have heard me do many times, for the damage that the church has done to the Christian gospel. That we have invented a Jesus who is not always the Jesus of the Gospels. We've invented a God who is not always the God of Jesus. And therefore, I had to sympathize with some of the arguments that were presented. Even though those arguments were twisted, they were coming from a lot of pain. But having read that, I want you to know I am confident in my Christianity. I'm confident in my faith. And if you want some good things to read on that, we can recommend a couple of really good books. Okay, tonight, just for a few minutes, what I have to say to you may not be long, or necessarily some may not think it's very deep, but it is, in my view, deeply profound. I want to talk to you a little bit about values tonight. Now, every time I say that, all I can see is Bob Nichols, because it's a Bob Nichols kind of subject, isn't it? And I'm trying to think, don't become Bob when you're... Okay, not that anything against Bob, I appreciate him, but I am not, stop digging a hole, stop it. I am not in my approach to things particularly psychologically driven. I am more philosophically driven, okay? And so what I say to you tonight, I'm trying not to be too psychological in my approach, but a little bit more philosophical. So I do want to talk to you about the whole issue of values. Do you have values? And if you do, what are they? One definition that I've heard of this says this, that values are important and lasting beliefs or ideals about what is good or bad and desirable or undesirable. Let me say that again. That values are important and lasting beliefs or ideals about what is good or bad and desirable or undesirable. But if values are only beliefs and ideals, then I propose to you that they're not values at all. They're just beliefs and ideals. And I have to say, without being critical tonight, that what most of you believe are values in your life are only beliefs and ideals. Because they are only beliefs and ideals. If we define values as the determining factor in the way things are done, right, let's get away from beliefs and ideals. If we define values as the determining factor in the way things are done, here's the big question. When you look at yourself, Do you see yourself being those things? So if I were to ask you, do you have values in your life? My question is, do you see yourself being those things? Because if all they are is beliefs and ideals, they're not actually values. Do you understand? So a value is something that I be, right? I am my values, or they are not values. But for most people, the values are only beliefs and ideals, and that's my worry for us tonight as I try to lay down a premise for this community for this year. So if the big question is that when you look at yourself, do you see yourself being those things that you believe are your values? Let's flip that around. Is what you are being the only reliable indicator of your true values? So whatever you tell me or anyone else are your values, my question is, but is what you're being the only true indicator of your real values? That when you look at your life, your values are expressed by your being. Not by your thinking, not by your idealizing, not by your preaching, but by your being. So in everything, the Bible gives us a scripture about the values that we hold, okay? In Matthew 7, verse 12. It's a verse that I don't think I've ever preached on this verse. It's a verse that I've rarely heard preach on. Because actually the challenge of it is bigger than most of us want to accept. Here's what it says. So in everything, how much is everything? Is everything a selective process? So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. Now, just a little theological digression. The people to whom Jesus was saying this were obsessed with the Jewish law that came from Moses, 10 Commandments and all that, and the prophets that were the guiding factors added to the law to every Hebrew believer in Jehovah God. And yet along comes Jesus. Again, I love the Jesus of the Bible. Because along comes the Jesus of the Bible and upsets the whole premise of their belief. He disturbs the whole context of their faith. Now, I believe if your Jesus is not doing that for you, it's not the Jesus of the Bible. It's like he always wanted to pull the rug out from under them to see if they could still stand. And so he makes this amazing statement that says, okay, I'm going to tell you something that sums up all the law and the prophets. Everything that you think you know and everything that you think you believe hangs on this. Do to others in everything as you would have them do to you. What a challenging statement. What a shift of focus. You do to others as you would have them do to you. And let that be the summary of your whole theological belief system. It's Jesus talking. Now, I have to throw another little thing in here before I go to the next scripture that attaches to that and repeats it. Which is this, that this statement, do to others what you would have them do to you. And incidentally, it's not what I often say to people, do it unto others before they do it unto you. How many of you know that sometimes things that we receive consciously becomes distorted subconsciously? I know sitting there with your holier-than-thou looks on your face and your little religious smile and the halo that's almost visible, that none of us would ever conceive this, but often what happens, we hear something like that, do to others what you would have them do to you, but subconsciously that is reshaped within our understanding to do it unto others before they do it unto you. And sadly, that's how we tend to live. So the question is, what is my value? My value is what I am being. And if my being is do it to others before they do it unto you, that's my value system. Or in other words, don't let anything take anything from you. Make sure you're always ahead in advance. Always guard yourself. Always protect yourself. Well, now let me read you something else that Jesus said. Because this statement is not meant to be used to excuse us from responsibility in the face of behavior of others. Now I'm going to say that again because it's so important. This statement is not meant to be used to excuse us from responsibility in the face of the behavior of others. You see, most of our reactions in life are based on the behavior of others. So our values actually are a reaction to the behavior of others. So we say, oh, I have real values, when actually our true values are exposed, because often it's a reaction to the behavior of others, and our lives are a reaction to what others are doing. Jesus is saying, I don't want you to live that way, and you don't have to live that way. It's rather this statement, do to others what you would have them do to you. It's rather to determine our behavior regardless of how we feel we have been dealt with by others. And if you can catch this tonight, it will not only change your life, but it will revolutionize the spirit of this community, particularly that we call the Rock, or if you're not from the Rock, the wider community that we call the church. Because Jesus also says in Luke chapter 6, verse 27 through 36, but I tell you who hear me. Now, some of you know that's a silly statement if you just mean people who can hear you because you're actually talking to them. Yeah? So this is where the philosophical side comes in. He obviously wasn't meaning, but I tell you who hear me, because there's people at the back that couldn't hear. He was saying you can listen without hearing. You can listen without hearing. And if you're only listening but not hearing, nothing ever changes. So there comes another question is, when you are in a situation like this, are you listening but not hearing? Because when you're hearing, something happens on the inside. Just like sometimes you can be talking and saying out. But I tell you, hear me, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. If someone strikes you on one cheek, turn to him the other also. If someone takes your cloak, don't stop him from taking your tunic. Give to everyone who asks of you, and if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. It's a good word, isn't it, for first message of the new year? Some of you know it's a different way to live. Some of you are sat already in here plotting your revenge for the bad things you think have been done to you. That's not the Jesus of the Bible. That's not the values of the kingdom. Verse 31, do to others as you would have them do to you. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll change. But it does mean that you'll change. And what I've found in 56 years of life is that when you change, it doesn't matter whether they change or not. But many of you are screwed up, messed up, twisted, bent, don't know what to do next, about to make stupid decisions and miss the boat. Because your whole life is governed by, if I do it to others as I would have them do to me, it will change them. But you see, the Christian gospel is not about you changing them. The Christian gospel is about him changing you. And then when you're changed, you don't mind so much about whether they changed or not. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners expecting to be repaid in full. But love your enemies. Now see what? Okay, don't miss it. Love your what? Don't say love your friends. Don't say love the people who give you what you're looking for. The people who meet your expectations. Jesus said there's a different way to live here. Love your enemies. Why? Because he'll change your enemies? No, because he'll change you. And in the process, your enemies might be changed. But if your enemies are changed, they're only going to be changed because it changed you. Having been a pastor, Christian leader for many years, one of the little things I've heard over the years, which is always interesting, about people who never seem to settle, of course, in my field, in my world, people who never seem to settle in a church, and so go from church to church. And you invariably hear the problems with that church. I left that church because. And then the next church, well, I left that one because. And then I left that one because. Now, this could be your job, this could be your marriage, this could be a friendship, right? This could be a house. I left it because, and of course, somebody kind of comes to the conclusion to say, did you ever think in not being able to find a perfect church, a perfect marriage, a perfect friendship, that the problem might be you? That's why there always seems to be a problem wherever you go, because it's where you go. And so the whole challenge of this message is not about changing the world, it's about letting God change you. But love your enemies. And then it gets worse. Do good to them. And lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High. So that's the reward. You're sons of the Most High. There is a connection with God in your life that is made when you begin to live this way, that was just like the connection had with God, Jesus had with God in his life. You'll be sons of the Most High because he is kind to the ungrateful and wicked, which I'm pleased about. Be merciful just as your Father is merciful. What a community we create when we live these values. When this is the way things are done. Would you agree? Now at this point, I want to remind you of something that Jesus said with a twist. Jesus said, if your eye is dark, your whole being is full of darkness. Now, here's the twist. Instead of reading that as E-Y-E, if your eye is dark, your whole being is full of darkness, I want you to put just the I in there, okay? The letter I. And read what that says. If your eye is dark, your whole being is full of darkness. So the answer to the light in me is the I. And that's what this message is all about. It's about the values that I am. Right? Not that I believe, but the values that I am. Something that has value can only be classified so if it exacts a price. See, value and price are two things that go together. If it does not exact or require a price, it's worth nothing. Therefore, has no value. So values are costly. Am I prepared to live according to my values in view of this? See, we all want to proclaim values until those values demand a cost from us, and then all of a sudden we don't become those values because of the cost that they are demanding of us, which I have to say to you, then your values are without worth. A value always has to cost somebody, somehow, in some way. I don't think there's anybody in here that would disagree that we want to live our lives by an appropriate value system. But I'm not sure how we handle that in the understanding of this, that a value always has to cost somebody somehow in some way. But if we're going to be a different community, that's what it takes. We all want to see good, wholesome values in society, but no one seems to want to pay what it costs. Have you ever noticed we want to demand that governments do stuff, and then when governments say, but it's going to cost you this, we get mad with the government? Because we want stuff, but don't want to pay what it costs. God wanted stuff. God wanted your heart. God wanted your love. God wanted your trust. He wanted your faith, and he knew it would cost him. But he didn't shrink back from the cost. It actually cost him his own son. That's what the cross is all about. Because God's values are who he is. And when you see what he has done, you know what his values are, because his values are expressed through his being. His being was sacrificing his son for your sake and for my sake to express his values. Values have a cost. And if you want to be a person who has values, then it's going to cost. We all want to see good, wholesome values, but who wants to pay the cost? But here's where I wanted to bring you to in this, because I feel it's very important for everybody here this year, and particularly for the community of people in this house. The things we value in our lives should not be what we expect from others, but what we expect of ourselves. Now, without being unkind, but wanting to be as honest as possible, the sticking point and the problem of values in a community is this very issue that we base our understanding on what we expect from others rather than what we expect from ourselves. So I'm going to read that to you again. Please hear me. I'm going to come back to the words of Jesus right here, okay? I tell you who hear me. Now, I know you're all listening, but I'm telling you who hear me, this will save your life today, and it'll change this community if you catch it. The things we value in our lives should not be what we expect from others, but what we expect of ourselves. So, for example, if I say truth is important to me, it should not be the means by which I judge others, but the means by which I judge myself. So I'm not judging whether you're being truthful. I have to judge, am I being truthful? Now, some of you know when we say we have a value, usually it's what we expect of others. So we say, well, I have values and you didn't meet my values. But values, according to Jesus, are not something you lay up for someone else to meet. They are something you are convicted of to give yourself. It's got nothing to do with others. So if I say truth is important to me, it should not be the means by which I judge you or anyone, but the means by which I judge myself. If I say faithfulness is important to me, and people get upset because they say, oh, but I'm such a faithful person, and this person did that, and faithfulness is important to me. No, if we're really living by values, if I say faithfulness is important to me, it should not be the means by which I judge others, but the means by which I judge myself. Am I faithful through everything? And is my faithfulness measured by someone else's faithfulness to me? Then it's not faithfulness. Because as Jesus already said, if you give to those who already give, then even sinners do that. If you forgive those who are already forgiven, even sinners do that. He said, I want you to make this a value of your own life. And then we have people who have real values because it's about me. It's the I. If I say acceptance is important to me, then I have to say it should not be the means by which I judge others, but the means by which I judge myself. If I say forgiveness is important to me, it should not be the means by which I judge others, but the means by which I judge myself. Do you understand? So all of us can say, but this is important to me. Then it should not be the means by which you judge others that they don't live up to what's important to me, but the means by which you judge yourself. And then you are being the value that you hold, rather than just believing it as an ideal. Now, just to begin to bring this to a close, I find it fascinating again that the guys sung something tonight that we never converse about where we're going. It's a wasted exercise with me anyway. Chris knows that now. She's given up after all these years. But I always find it incredible how somehow God, by His Spirit, causes the whole thing to knit together. And so things are sung and things are said which just connect with what's coming next without the whole thing being tied together and say, let's plan this to do this. And something like that happened tonight. And this I want to use to finish on. You see, stuff happens in all our lives and we all find means to get upset. We all find means to get disappointed, and if you don't find it, it will find you. I've tried to isolate myself from pain and difficulty and disappointment and disillusionment, but I found that when I'm not finding it, somehow it still finds me. I haven't found a good hiding place yet to avoid trouble and problems and hardship. In fact, in the oldest book of the Bible, the book of Job, Job says that man is born to trouble as sure as the sparks fly upwards. Well, you try to get sparks flying downwards, you can't. So, if your plan in life is to avoid disappointment, disillusionment, hurt, things that don't meet your expectation, then you're going to use all your energy on something that you will never accomplish or achieve. Look, stuff like that happens. But here Jesus is trying to help us by saying, let the values that you say you have be your values, right? Let them be your values that you live by, that it's the I that brings light to you, because these are the values that you live by. But in His wisdom, God threw a fire blanket on the fires that flare up in our lives which threaten to destroy us. Some of you right now have got little embers that are just niggling. Some of you have got a few sparks. Some of you have got a raging blaze and you're trying to figure out what's your next move. Part of that connects to the whole value thing, that you're feeling that way because you're wanting others to have values, and if they change their values, you're going to change your attitude and change your mind. I'm here to tell you never will. I'm so glad that what Jesus set about doing was saying, when you change, your world changes. Silly little story, but I've never forgotten it, learned it as a kid. It's probably not true. I know I'm awful, but like a lot of preach stories, they're often not the kind of, they've grown little bits and become developed. But the wonderful stories, and that's fine, I'm cool with that. The story I remember was a young boy was given a jigsaw puzzle of the world. And his dad told him to try and put the world together. And he couldn't do it. This little boy struggled. It was too difficult. It was too complex. Eunice would have cracked it, and Eve, but that's another story. It was too complex, too difficult. And then his dad gave him a word of advice. He said, okay, I want you to turn all the pieces over. Turn it upside down. And on the back of the jigsaw puzzle of the world was a jigsaw picture of a man. And his dad said, you see, if you put the man together right, you put the world together right. And I have to tell you that principle still applies tonight. For you as an individual, if you put the man together right, you put the world together right. It's not the other way around. You don't put the world together and it sorts you out. Whatever that world is, and forget China, Japan, Hong Kong, Indonesia, your world is your job, it's your family, it's the people around you, it's the community of the church, it's your friends, it's the challenges that you face, it's the difficulties. That's your world. Some of you are still trying to piece that world together, and you'll never put it together. You've got to flip it on its head and say, if I put the man together, I put the world together. Do unto others as you'd have them do for you. Live the values, be your values. Don't expect others to live your values and be your values. You be your values, and your world will change. So in that fire, God in his wisdom throws a fire blanket on the fires that flare up in our lives that threaten to destroy us. Now, I don't know what you know about putting out fires, but a fire blanket smothers the flames, and it starves the fire of oxygen. So the fire can't breathe. If you didn't know that fires breathe, fires have got to have oxygen. When you throw a blanket on the fire, it starves it of oxygen, it goes out. It can't continue to burn. Now here's that fire blanket that God throws in his wisdom on the fires that flare up in our lives which threaten to destroy us. And it's found in Romans 8 and verse 28. Listen to this. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him and have been called according to his purpose. Now remember what we said about values being beliefs and ideals, and I said, if your values are only beliefs and ideals, they're only beliefs and ideals and not values. Well, some of you read this, and I know that in all things God works for the good of those who love us and who have been called according to his purpose. But I have to challenge you, you don't believe it. Because if you did, you wouldn't be thinking the thoughts that you're thinking right now. You wouldn't be making the plans that you've been making these past weeks and months. Because if you believe that we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him and have been called according to his purpose, it's actually all working for your good. You only got here because of where you've been. Even the people in our lives delivered us to the challenges that we now address. So you wouldn't be facing the challenge you now face without the people in your life. But if I stop believing that in all things God is working for my good, because I love him and I'm called according to his purpose, the moment I stop, then I cease to live in the values that he has laid down for my life. When I catch this, I can do to others as I would have them do to me, because now there's nothing in the way. Because I believe that even in the difficulties, the challenges, the disappointments, the conflicts, the confusions, the fallouts, the fall-ins, I can know that in all things God is working for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And so I want to lay down a marker for you as a believer tonight. If you're not a believer, I want to lay down a marker for you, because these principles work in life. God principles work in anybody at any time, in any place, through anything. I want to lay it down for you. My desire is that you'd meet the Jesus of the Bible, and you'd meet the Father of Jesus, who are actually very wonderful, very, very wonderful, full of mercy and kindness and compassion. And I want you to meet them, and you can meet them, and God's made it easy for you to meet him. But I also want to lay down a marker for those of you who are part of this house and the community of this house, that this is a year for us to be our values. Right? Not to expect others, but to be what our values are. And our values, even in that, should finally come to this, that we know, even in the difficult challenges, we know that in all things, God is working for the good of those who love him and have been called according to his purpose. So in view of that, I give thanks to God for those who've come and those who've gone. I give thanks for those who were kind and those who were cruel. I give thanks for those who have acted with integrity and for those who haven't. I give thanks for those who have blessed me and for those who have cursed me. I give thanks for those whose love has stood the test of time, and also for those whose hasn't. I give thanks for those who have always given, and for those who have always taken. And so I could go on and go on and go on, because if I believe that God is working all things for the good of me because I love him and I'm called according to his purpose, then everything is working on my behalf. I can only become who I am because of what happens in the process of my becoming who I am. Therefore, every person is significant. Every event is significant. Every disappointment is significant. Every blessing is significant. Every loss is significant. Every gain is significant. Everything suddenly takes on a significance because I am becoming mature in the presence of the one who called me and who loved me, so that my life comes into a dimension of blessing that is not governed by circumstance but determined by the values that I have held because of the Christ who has touched my life. This will build great community. This will bring change. But only if it goes beyond the belief and ideal stage. I don't know what the ideal church is. Joel talked last week about pseudo-community. I don't know what the ideal church is. In fact, I was thinking on holiday as I was praying, there are two reasons why I do what I do. Number one is because God called me. Now, whether you understand that or not, I understand it. It made me make a decision to go from a life of pursuing being a college lecturer to giving my life to share the good news about Jesus. That's the first reason, because God called me. The second reason I do this is because of all my imperfections. That wasn't a Freudian slip. Yeah, but surely if you're a preacher, if you're a man of God, it should be because of the call of God and your perfection. No, it's because of my imperfections. God called me, and my imperfections qualify me to do this. Because you see, the goodness of God works best in the imperfections of humanity. And that's where the change comes, the challenge every day. Because in all things, God is working for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. So, I want to bless everybody who has helped me get to where I am. I want to bless the Redmond family. I want to bless a dear minister in the city called Graham Hutchinson. I want to bless Graham Caswell, who's another minister in the city. I want to bless everybody who got me where I am. Because without them, and without you, and some of you have been a joy to the heart, some of you have been a pain in the... And many of us have been both of those things at different times. And I also to you. But I thank you. I thank you for every difficult moment. Every challenging moment. Every painful moment. And every encouraging moment. And every loving moment. And every blessing moment. And every kind moment. Because it's not just one side of that that made us who we are. In all things, God is working for the good of those who love him and called according to his purpose. The stuff that happened to you this day, this week, this month, this year, all happened for a purpose. There is a purpose in all of it that you're trying to figure out, because it didn't always meet your expectations. But we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. If you will work with that, you are becoming what God wanted you to become. It's costly like the snow tires, but it'll get you out of the place where you thought you were going to be stuck, and you won't miss the boat. So I challenge you this year not to hear the words of Anth Chapman, but to hear the words of Jesus. Do to others as you'd have them do to you. Don't be a projector of values and ideals. Be values. Be the forgiveness that's important to you. Be the loyalty that's important to you. Be the faithfulness that's important to you. Be the giving that's important to you. Be the kindness that's important to you. Be the grace that's important to you. You be it. Because I will guarantee you this one thing. To the extent to which you change is the extent to which your world will change. Will your enemies love you? Will difficulties cease? maybe, maybe not. But how much will it matter if you know that in all things God is working for your good because you love him and are called according to his purpose? You can't miss the boat. Bow your heads with me for one moment. Father, in Jesus' name, in this house, in this place tonight, visit every heart by your Spirit, I pray. And let the challenge of your word bring change in our life. And as each one of us today face the question of what are your values, that each one of us not only will be able to express to you the things that are important to us, but will express them from the Spirit that says in these values, I will do to others what I would like them to do to me. And in it will follow the Spirit of Christ that changes my life, because instead of trying to put my world back together, I put the man back together. So help us to simplify this thing right down again, Father. That if my eye is good, if my eye is doing what it's supposed to do, my whole being is full of light. So I pray tonight, Father, in this house, that we will release all those who we feel are indebted to us, those who we feel cannot be forgiven by us, those who we cannot release and let go. Let that change right now, I pray, Father, in Jesus' name, as we choose to do to others what we would have them do to us. And so by faith, by your Spirit, at the start of this year, as we lay down this as a value, a principle for the house that we will live by, that the values are something that we will live by rather than expect others to live by our values, as we lay that down, Father, right now, by faith, I cast that fire blanket over this whole house, the fire blanket that you provided for us to cut off the fires that have been burning in our lives. That I declare that in all things, God is working for the good of everyone who loves you and is called according to your purpose tonight. We receive that and we release that in Jesus' name. And because of it, we know that our world will change. And everybody said, yes. Didn't we? All right, love you, care about you. That's why I'm being honest. Let's live the values, all right? So we're done. Bless you. Love you. See you Wednesday or Saturday. Got any questions? We'll be down here. All right, we're done.